Imagine losing everything you've worked for, your retirement, your security, gone in an instant because of a greedy scheme. That's exactly what happened to 70-year-old Carol, but what she did next? No one saw it coming. Female CEO cries, I lost everything. The mechanic simply says, you still have her. Mommy, why aren't we moving? Ava Bennett blinked, her hand still gripping the steering wheel as if holding on tightly might keep everything else from falling apart. Rain hammered against the windshield, streaking the world outside into a blur of gray and fractured light. The car's just taking a little break, sweetie, she said, forcing a smile into her voice. In the rear seat, Mia hugged her worn teddy bear closer. The soft toy-stitched smile tilted with concern. Is it broken? Maybe just tired, Ava murmured. It had been the kind of day that felt like a test she never agreed to take. That morning, a boardroom filled with stony faces. A contract she'd spent months securing, torn apart by a hidden clause she hadn't seen coming. Stock prices plummeted before lunch. The media swarmed, calling her a failure before she had time to catch her breath. That afternoon, the sudden downpour in the parking lot, soaking her hair, her dress clinging to her skin. Now, her Mercedes, her last symbol of control, dead on the shoulder of an empty back road. It felt like the universe was checking boxes on her destruction list. She reached for her phone and dialed roadside assistance. Operators are currently busy. The automated voice sang. She tried again. Same result. A third attempt. The same cold answer. Ava let the phone slide into her lap. Her fingers trembled. Outside, the rain beat harder, seeping in through the edges of the window. Mia leaned forward, her small voice soft. Are you crying? Ava turned her face away. Just rain, honey. Taking a breath, she unbuckled her seatbelt. Stay here. Mommy's going to check the car. She stepped out into the downpour. Cold air wrapped around her instantly, her heels skidding on the slick asphalt. She popped the hood and stared at the tangle of metal and wires. She knew financial forecasts and hostile press cycles, but this she closed the hood. The sound sharp in the rain. Moving to the rear, she pressed her shoulder against the trunk, straining to push the car farther from the lane. The rain plastered her dress to her legs, her shoes slipping with each shove. The car inched forward, stubborn as stone. Her lungs burned. Why does it all have to happen today? A shadow appeared beside her. A firm, steady hand caught her elbow before she could lose her balance. Easy there, ma'am. Let me help. She turned, meeting the calm eyes of a tall man. Rain darkened his t-shirt, a smear of grease marking his forearm. Hair plastered to his forehead. From inside the car, Mia had lowered the window just enough to call out. Are you a superhero? You look like one. A quick smile touched his mouth. Just a mechanic, kiddo. Without another word, he shrugged off his heavy jacket and draped it over Keva's shoulders. The warmth startled her. He moved to the back of the car. Bracing himself, on three, he said, 1, 2, 3. The car rolled into place with surprising ease under his strength. He popped the hood, leaning in with practice efficiency. Within minutes, the engine roared back to life. Ava dug into her bag and pulled out a folded $100 bill. Please take it, she said, her voice cracking. I lost everything today. My job, my dignity, and now my car. He glanced at the money, then at Mia in the back seat, watching him with wide eyes. Gently, he pushed Ava's hand back. You still have her, he said quietly. That's enough payment for today. The words landed heavier than the rain. She held his gaze, something in her chest loosening. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded. Drive safe. Keep the jacket until you're dry. As she slid behind the wheel, Mia grinned from the back seat. Bye, Uncle Mechanic. In the mirror, Ava saw him standing in the rain, one hand lifted in farewell. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time all day, it didn't feel quite so impossible. Ava's phone was glued to her ear, her free hand tapping impatiently against the kitchen counter. The apartment smelled faintly of burnt toast, a casualty of her distracted morning. She had been pacing between the sink and the window for nearly 20 minutes, trying to coax a weary supplier into staying with the company despite the storm of bad press. No, we're not shutting down, she said firmly into the phone, forcing conviction into her tone. We're restructuring. You'll still get paid. She winced as the caller cut her off. Yes, I understand your concerns. I just need a little more time. Behind her, Mia sat at the table, swinging her legs and watching her mother with the quiet concentration of a child who understands more than she should. On the chair beside her sat a small plastic container of chocolate chip cookies, the kind they bake together on weekends. She rummaged through the drawer for a marker and a scrap of paper. In clumsy looping letters, she wrote, "Thank you." She added a smiley face, the marker squeaking faintly against the page. Ava hung up with a sigh, dropping the phone onto the counter. Come on, Mia. We're going to be late. The school day passed in a blur for Ava, meetings stacked on top of one another, each one more exhausting than the last. By the time she drove to pick me up, the sun had already begun its slow descent, painting the edges of the clouds gold. She pulled up to the curb and scanned the crowd of children spilling out of the school gates. Mia wasn't there. The tightness in her chest was instant. She parked, leaving the car idling, and walked quickly toward the playground, eyes sweeping every corner. Mia, she called, her voice sharper than she intended. A faint giggle drifted from somewhere beyond the fence. Ava followed the sound, rounding the corner onto a side street she rarely used. The low rumble of an engine and the smell of motor oil met her before she saw them. There, in the open bay of a small autocar, Mia sat on a worn wooden stool, her legs dangling. She was chattering away, holding out the container of cookies toward Luke Carter. He was crouched down so their eyes were level, a clean rag in one hand as he wiped the grease from the other. "I made these with Mommy," Mia was saying proudly. "They're for you." Luke smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Best cookies in the whole town," he said as he accepted the container. He placed it carefully on the workbench as if it were something fragile. Relief flooded Ava so quickly it left her a little unsteady. She stepped into the garage, her heels clicking against the concrete. "Mia, you can't just run off without telling me where you're going." Mia turned, her expression caught between guilt and stubbornness. "I just wanted to say thank you." Ava's first instinct was to scoop her daughter up and march her straight back to the car. But then she saw the way Mia's face lit up when Luke gave her a conspiratorial wink, and the words softened in her throat. "I'm sorry if she interrupted your work," Ava said, glancing at Luke. "Not at all," Luke replied easily. "She's good company." For a moment, the three of them stood there, the sound of rain beginning to tap gently against the metal roof. The scent of oil and warm cookies mingled in the air. Ava rested a hand on Mia's shoulder. "All right, let's get home," she said, though her voice had lost its edge. Luke gave a small nod. "Drive safe." As they walked back toward the car, Ava glanced over her shoulder. Luke was still standing in the garage doorway, one hand resting on the edge of the workbench, the cookie container beside him. He caught her eye briefly, and there was something unspoken there. An acknowledgement, maybe of the fact that gratitude sometimes needed no more than a small shared moment. The rain had settled into a soft, steady rhythm by late afternoon, the kind that blurred the edges of the world without washing it away. The garage was quiet. The last customer's taillights had disappeared down the street an hour ago. Only the faint ticking of a cooling engine and the muted drip of rainwater from the gutters broke the stillness. Luke wiped his hands on a clean rag, then glanced toward the small counter in the corner where an old coffee pot sat. "You drink coffee this late?" he asked, already reaching for 2 mugs. Ava hesitated. "Depends. Is it strong enough to keep me up for 2 days?" A grin flickered at the corner of his mouth. "Stronger than whatever you get at those fancy boardroom meetings." He poured a dark steaming stream into each mug, then handed one to her. "Consider it a thank you for the cookies." Mia said, "You helped." She accepted it, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. Helping is generous. She was the one measuring and mixing. I just stopped her from adding glitter. They settled into a pair of worn chairs in the far corner of the garage. The smell of oil and metal lingered in the air, but it was softened by the rich aroma of coffee. Above them, the rain pattered on the corrugated metal roof, a slow and calming heartbeat. Ava sipped carefully, then set her mug on her knee. "This place. It smells like my childhood," she said, her eyes sweeping over the organized chaos of tools and spare parts. "My dad was a mechanic, worked in a little shop not far from where we lived. I used to sit on an upturned milk crate and watch him fix things. He could take apart anything and put it back together. Lawnmowers, toasters, cars, you name it." Luke leaned back, resting one arm on the chair. "Sounds like a good man." "He was," she said softly. "But one day there was an accident at the shop. Faulty equipment. He didn't make it." Her fingers tightened around the mug. "I was 12. After that I decided I'd never be stuck in a small place with no way out. I wanted more, so I climbed and climbed until I couldn't see the ground anymore." Luke didn't interrupt. His gaze was steady, his silence more comfortable than most people's attempts at sympathy. "What about you?" she asked after a moment, grateful for the shift. "How does someone like you end up running a quiet little garage?" He took a long sip of coffee, eyes drifting toward the rain-speared window. "I used to race cars, not bikes. Local circuits, some bigger tracks when I got lucky. I lived for it. The speed, the noise, the feeling that nothing else mattered." He paused, jaw tightening slightly. "Then one night, a friend of mine, my teammate, was in a race with me. Something went wrong, mechanical failure. He didn't make it out of the crash." Eva's breath caught. "I'm sorry, not your fault," Luke said, shaking his head. "After that, I couldn't go back. The track didn't feel the same without him. So, I opened this place, still fixed cars, just at a pace that doesn't try to kill you." They sat in the quiet that followed, the rain filling the spaces between words. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, more like two people resting in the knowledge that some losses didn't need to be explained. Ava glanced at him, studying the lines at the corners of his eyes, the faint grease stain he'd missed near his wrist. "It's strange," she said. "We both lost people we thought would always be there." Luke met her gaze. "And we're both still here." She smiled faintly, a curve of her lips more honest than she'd allowed herself in weeks. "Maybe that's something. Maybe it's everything," he said. The rain kept falling. The coffee cooled between their hands, and for a little while, neither of them was in a hurry to leave. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm Ava hadn't expected, one where her route home occasionally happened to take her past Luke's garage. The first time she had a legitimate reason, an oil change. The second she told herself the car was making a faint noise she couldn't quite place. By the third visit, she had stopped pretending she was there only for the car. She would linger a little longer than necessary, leaning against the counter while Luke worked, watching the easy way his hands moved over metal and bolts. Luke didn't call her out on it. If he noticed that her vehicle hardly needed the attention she claimed it did, he didn't say. Instead, he'd greet her with a nod, wipe his hands on a rag, and offer her the same chipped mug of coffee he kept behind the counter. Sometimes it went the other way. Luke would show up at her building, his pickup parked out front, holding something Mia had left behind. A scarf, a notebook, once even a small toy car. He left it at the shop. He'd say, passing it over with a half smile. Once, when Ava mentioned her kitchen faucet had been leaking for weeks, he showed up the next evening with a toolbox and fixed it without charging her. Mia's bond with him grew even faster. She would bound into the living room after school, clutching a new drawing, colorful, wobbly portraits labeled in big letters. Mommy, me and Uncle Luke. One had the three of them standing under a rainbow. Another showed a very tall Luke holding a wrench in one hand and a pizza in the other. It was Mia who suggested the pizza night. Ava had been buried under paperwork, her dinner plan amounting to cereal for the both of them when Mia appeared at her desk. "Can Uncle Luke come with us to eat pizza?" she asked. Her eyes wide in that way Ava found hard to refuse. So they ended up at a small pizzeria on the corner, the kind with red checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic bread in the air. They slid into a booth, Mia between them, bouncing with excitement. When the pizza arrived, the cheese stretched in long strings, and the slices were far too big for Mia's small hands. Ava reached for the serving spatula, but Luke was already cutting one slice into neat, manageable squares. He pushed a plate in front of Mia, who grinned at him like he'd just performed a magic trick. "Thanks, Uncle Luke," she said, spearing a bite with her fork. Ava watched the exchange, something warm settling low in her chest. She wasn't used to this, someone else quietly stepping in, making her daughter feel seen without being asked. The conversation drifted easily. Luke told a funny story about a customer who had tried to fix his own alternator and ended up gluing part of it to the hood. Mia recounted in dramatic detail a schoolyard game that had apparently involved an invisible dragon. Ava found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. After dinner, they walked out into the cool night air. The street lamps painted the sidewalk in pools of gold. Mia skipped ahead, humming to herself, her hand clasped around a small leftover box Luke carried for her. Ava glanced at him. "You're good with her," she said softly. Luke shrugged. "Kids are honest. They tell you exactly what they think. Makes it easier to know where you stand." They reached the corner where their paths would split. His truck parked down one street, her building up the other. Mia ran back, pressing the box of leftovers into Ava's hands before throwing her arms around Luke's waist. "Good night, Uncle Luke," she said. "Good night, kiddo," he replied, giving her hair a gentle tousle. Eva watched as he walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the quiet street. She realized with a mixture of surprise and unease that she was already looking forward to the next accidental meeting. The tension inside the Bennett Technologies offices was a living thing. It clung to the air like static, buzzing in every whispered hallway conversation and in every set of eyes that darted away when Ava passed. Her phone never stopped ringing. Investors wanted reassurance she couldn't honestly give. Employees wanted to know if they'd have jobs next month. The media called daily, pressing for a statement while running headlines that painted her company's future in shades of disaster. One Tuesday morning, her assistant walked in with a slim leather folder. "You've got a meeting request," she said. "Big money. They want to buy in. Keep you as CEO. Could be salvation." Ava hesitated before opening the folder. Inside was a crisp letterhead bearing the name Argentum Group, a multinational conglomerate with deep pockets and a reputation for swallowing smaller companies whole. She knew they could stabilize her finances overnight. She also knew there was always a cost. 2 days later, she was ushered into a sleek glass-walled boardroom high above the city. The man waiting for her, Argentum's CEO, was all smooth smiles and expensive tailoring. "We've been following your work for years, Miss Bennett," he began, pouring her a glass of water like they were old friends. "Your company has potential. It just needs the right backing." He laid out the offer with the precision of someone closing in on prey. Argentum would buy a controlling share, invest heavily, and keep Ava in the EO's chair. "We'll weather this storm together," he promised, his tone rehearsed. Ava's gaze wandered as he spoke, drawn to the wall behind him. Framed photographs hung in neat rows, images of the company's past ventures. One in particular caught her breath, a younger Luke smiling beside another man about the same age. Both wore racing suits, their arms slung over each other's shoulders, the background filled with the blur of a racetrack. "That was years ago," the CEO said when he saw where she was looking. "We sponsored a racing team for a while. Great publicity." His voice slid past the truth, skipping whatever story lay in the shadows of that photograph. But Ava knew. She remembered Luke's quiet tone the night he told her about the crash, the teammate who didn't make it, the end of his racing career. She remembered the way he'd looked past her when he said he never went back to the track. And now she was sitting across from the man who had written that chapter in fine print. She finished the meeting on autopilot, her responses polite but distant. By the time she returned to her office, her pulse was still uneven. That night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the city's muted glow spilling through the curtains. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Luke's hands, grease-stained, steady, fixing her stalled car in the rain. She saw him cutting pizza for Mia, dropping by with things her daughter had left behind, showing up when she didn't ask, but somehow needed it most. He had never once asked for anything in return. And here she was, weighing whether to align herself with the very people who had taken something from him that he could never get back. By dawn, the decision was clear. At 9 o'clock sharp, she called Argentum's CEO. "I appreciate the offer," she said evenly, "but I'm going to pass." He sounded almost amused. "You understand what you're walking away from?" "I do," she said, "and I understand what I'd be walking into." She hung up before he could reply, leaning back in her chair. The storm outside her office window mirrored the one her company was still facing. But for the first time in weeks, Ava felt certain she had done the right thing. The road ahead might still be brutal, the headlines might still sting, but she would rather stand in the wreckage with her integrity intact than rebuild on someone else's ruins, especially if those ruins belonged to Luke's past. Ava found Luke in the garage late that evening, the place lit by 2 overhead bulbs and the faint glow of a desk lamp. He looked up from the carburetor as she stepped in, rain still on her coat. "I turned them down," she said. He set down his wrench. "Turned who down?" "Argentum Group. They offered to buy in, keep me as CEO, pour money into the company." She crossed her arms. "They're the ones who sponsored your team back then, the accident. I saw the photo in their office." His brow furrowed. "You walked away. Even with your company in this shape, I couldn't take their help," she said, "not knowing what they cost you." He leaned back, exhaling. "Most people would have signed and told themselves it wasn't personal. I'm not most people." Something in his eyes shifted. Gratitude, quiet, respect. "All right, let's make it personal. Let's take them down." That night, they began sketching ideas on a grease-smudged notepad. Luke reached out to old racing contacts, mechanics, pit crew, retired drivers. Ava called journalists she trusted. They gathered contracts, photos, anything pointing to the coercion that had led to the crash. But another storm was coming. One afternoon, Ava returned home to find a letter from her attorney. Her ex-husband's family had filed for custody of Mia. Their claim was blunt. Ava's failing finances and public company troubles proved she was unfit to provide stability. She sat at the table gripping the letter until her knuckles whitened. Luke arrived later, dropping off notes from a call with a racing official. He read the letter once, then met her eyes. "We'll fight it," he said, no hesitation. Days blurred. By day, Ava chased leads against Argentum, meeting sources in quiet cafes, cross-checking financial records. By night, she prepared with her lawyer to keep Mia through it all. Luke's presence was steady. He brought coffee when she worked past midnight, steam curling between stacks of papers. He left takeout on her desk when she skipped meals. More than once, she woke from an exhausted nap to find a blanket or his jacket draped over her shoulders. One night when the pressure felt unbearable, Luke appeared at her door. Truck idling. "Come on," he said. Mia, too. They drove with the windows down. Cool night air rushing in. City lights gave way to the open coast road. They stopped at a bluff. The ocean spread out like black glass below, waves whispering against the rocks. Mia ran ahead, chasing the wind, her laughter scattering into the night. Ava stood beside Luke, hair whipping in the breeze. "You don't have to do it alone," he said quietly. She turned to him, the truth sinking in. For weeks, she had braced herself against everything. Argentum, the custody fight, the press, without realizing someone was already standing beside her. In the dark, with the ocean breathing below and Mia's laughter carrying back to them, Ava finally believed she wasn't carrying the fight alone. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Ava was in her office reviewing yet another set of grim financial reports when her phone began buzzing nonstop. The headline flashed across every major news site. Insider sources expose racing scandal. Argentum Group under fire for deadly cover-up. The articles detailed everything Ava and Luke had worked for weeks to uncover. Forced mechanical tampering, falsified safety reports, payments to silence witnesses, names, dates, and damning documents filled the pages, and in each piece, Ava was quoted. Her decision to reject Argentum's buyout held up as an example of integrity in an industry that often lacked it. By midday, her inbox was full of messages from former clients and investors praising her for her courage and asking for meetings. A major supplier she thought she'd lost forever called to reinstate their contract. The tide, for the first time in months, was turning in her favor, but one battle still remained. The custody hearing was set for the following week. Ava arrived at the courthouse in a navy dress, her hair pulled back in a simple knot. Mia clung to her hand before being led to a family waiting room. Across the aisle sat her ex-husband's parents, their faces tight with polite disdain. When it was Luke's turn to take the stand, Ava felt her breath catch. He sat straight, his voice steady as he spoke. He told the court about Ava's commitment to her daughter, About the morning she rushed to make breakfast despite late nights at work. The way she sat through every school performance, the tenderness in how she listened when Mia spoke. She doesn't just love her daughter, Luke said, his eyes never leaving us. She breathes for her. The room went still. Even the judge paused before nodding for him to step down. When the ruling came, it was decisive. Full custody remained with Ava. The petition from her former in-laws was dismissed. The relief that washed over her was so strong she had to sit, her hands covering her face for a moment before she reached for Mia and held her tight. Outside the courthouse, Luke was waiting by the steps. Mia darted ahead to hug him, her laughter cutting through the late afternoon air. Ava followed more slowly, her gratitude unspoken but clear in her eyes. A week later, she stood before the Bennett Technologies board of directors. The company was stabilizing, new contracts signed, investor confidence on the rise. The board wanted her to remain CEO to guide them through the full recovery. She smiled but shook her head. I'm proud of what we've built. But I've been living at a sprint for too long. I'm stepping down as CEO. I'll stay on as a consultant, but it's time I make space for the rest of my life. There was surprise, some protest, but also respect. By the end of the meeting, her decision was accepted. When she left the building that day, the city felt different. The weight she had carried for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet certainty. The fight was over. She had her company's reputation back, her daughter's future secured. And though she hadn't yet put it into words, someone beside her, who had proven again and again he wouldn't let her face the storms alone. The garage sat at the edge of a quiet two-lane road, the kind where the hum of passing cars came in soft, steady intervals. It wasn't big, 2 service bays, a roll-up door painted a fresh deep blue, and above it a hand-painted sign, Carter and Bennett Auto and Coffee. Luke had chuckled when Ava first suggested the name, but she'd stood in the dusty space before renovations, arms crossed, and said, "People should know it's both of ours." Now, weeks later, the scent of fresh paint lingered beneath the richer aroma of brewed coffee. One side of the shop belonged to Luke, tools lined in precise rows, every wrench and socket in its place, the floor swept clean after each job. The other side was a warm corner with mismatched armchairs, a sturdy espresso counter, and shelves stacked with jars of cookies Mia proudly helped bake on weekends. Mia had her own little corner, too, an art nook tucked near the coffee counter with a low table, a basket of crayons, and a wall of drawings taped in cheerful clusters. At the center hung one of her earliest creations, Meet Mommy and Uncle Luke. The crayon colors were a little faded now, but the stick figure smile still radiated joy. The business had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Locals brought their cars in for oil changes or small repairs. Travelers stopped for coffee and a chat before getting back on the road. Ava worked the front counter, greeting customers, sliding lats across to truckers and parents with strollers. Luke kept to the bays, but she often caught him glancing up when she laughed with a regular. Every so often, she'd bring him a mug of coffee, setting it on his workbench without a word. He'd look up just enough to meet her eyes and give that quiet, almost shy smile that she had come to recognize as his way of saying thank you. One golden Friday afternoon, Luke's voice carried from the far end of the garage. "Hey, Ava, come here a sec." She wiped her hands on a towel and crossed the floor. In the sunlight streaming through the open bay door sat a car she hadn't seen in years. The pale blue Ford her father had driven, the chrome bumper polished to a mirror shine. She stopped in her tracks. "Luke, this is your dad's," he said, his voice steady. "Took some work to track it down and more to get it back here in one piece. Figured you might want it." Ava stepped forward, her fingers grazing the smooth hood. Memories flooded in, sitting in the passenger seat as a girl, her father's deep voice explaining each sound the engine made. "You fixed it," she murmured. "Every bolt," Luke said. "Even found the same model radio it used to have." Her throat tightened. "Why would you do all this?" He gave a small shrug, glancing away. "Some things shouldn't be left to rust." She blinked against the sting in her eyes, then whispered, "I found my family." He didn't answer with words, but his expression said enough. That evening, the three of them sat together on the wide wooden step outside the garage. The workday was done, tools put away, the smell of oil replaced by the cooling scent of coffee grounds. Mia leaned against Hava's side, coloring in a notebook while Luke sat on her other side, sipping from a battered mug. The sun dropped lower, brushing the horizon in streaks of gold and rose. From inside the garage came the faint metallic click of a screwdriver being set down, a sound that seemed to match the slow, steady heartbeat of the life they had built. Ava looked at the quiet road, the open fields beyond, and realized this wasn't the life she once imagined. No skyscrapers, no boardrooms, but it was solid, real, and warm. Luke's hand found hers, his touch steady and grounding. Mia looked up with a bright, unfiltered smile before returning to her drawing. In that moment, Ava knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, home. And so what began as a broken-down car on a rain-soaked road became the turning point in 3 lives. A reminder that sometimes losing everything clears the way to find what truly matters. Ava didn't just rebuild her career. She built a home filled with laughter, second chances, and love strong enough to weather any storm. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many more are waiting to be told. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories and join us for more heartfelt journeys of resilience, love, and the beautiful ways life can surprise us. Your next story might just be the one that stays with you forever. Music.